All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. I swear each week our guests just get better and better and better and more profound, more enlightening, more powerful, and just more amazing. Today is not the exception. I was going to throw a little joke in there, but I couldn't do it. I mean, it's legit. The guy we have on today is truly changing the world. He's changing the world through his voice, through his words, and through his daily actions. Today, we've got Jon Harper joining us on the Lasting Learning Podcast, just ready to share his story and share some truth with us. Jon, thanks so much for being here.
Dave, thanks for having me, man. I can't wait to have this conversation. It's going to be great.
Absolutely. You know, I'm sure people listening to this podcast have heard your voice through the airwaves of your own podcast, but they might not necessarily know your full story because you're always so caught up in getting other people's stories. Can you tell us who you are and what you're about?
Sure. I've been in education for 20 plus years. I actually got in by accident, Dave, to tell you the truth. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And so took a bunch of science classes and applied to med school. And while I was waiting to hear from med school, my mom said, you know what, Jon, you got to get a job. You can't just sit around the house. And so I started to substitute down the street at elementary school. And when I got waitlisted and then didn't get in, I didn't deserve to get in. I didn't get in. I wasn't that disappointed because I loved what I was doing. And so I went back to school and got a degree in elementary ed.
Hold on, I just want to pause. You loved substitute teaching?
I know, that sounds crazy.
Holy cow.
I know. That's what I knew. Yeah, I know. I don't think I like it now. Teaching has gotten a lot harder, that's for sure. But no, it was hard. I'll never forget that first day. I came home and I said, oh my gosh, Mom, I don't know what's going on here. It was something else. But I got the bug. I wasn't somebody who grew up thinking, you know what, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be in education, but I absolutely loved it. And then I went on to teach for 10 years, taught first, second, fourth, fifth, and was a math coach for about 3 years. And now I'm on my ninth or 10th year as a VP. I'm not even sure which. I should know, but I don't.
And so, first of all, a male elementary teacher, you must have been God. I mean, did the kids just totally adore you and like follow you around like the Pied Piper?
We do have a distinct advantage. There's no doubt. I think the bar, this sounds bad, and other male elementary school teachers might not like this, but the bar is lower for us because there's so few of us, I think.
Yeah.
And I think if you can just stand upright and, add and subtract and write a complete sentence, sometimes, I'm just kidding, but the kids they love it. And I'll never forget when I taught first grade, I would write just a basic sentence on the board or anything, and the kids were like, oh my gosh, Mr. Harper, your handwriting is so good. And I'm thinking, oh, you have no idea. Wait till you meet some real teachers that can actually print and do the Zane or Blaser the way it's supposed to be written. But they thought my handwriting was great, and I ran with it.
That's funny. And did you get any pushback from family or friends? I mean, you were on track to become a doctor, and then you become an elementary school teacher. Were they looking at you like, dude, what are you doing?
Not really. My dad was a doctor, and I thought, maybe I want to be. I mean, there was no real good reason. That was the thing. I didn't really have a great passion or reason, even though I spent 2 years taking some incredibly hard science classes, organic chemistry, physics, and all that. And, I did well, but my grades in undergrad, I didn't deserve to be in med school, and it wasn't something I was passionate about. But like you said, if anybody can enjoy substitute teaching and being around kids in that environment, different class, different day, then they're probably crazy enough to go into education. And I loved it.
Right. Well, being a doctor is probably not too far off from being an elementary teacher. I mean, it's all about cleaning up the messes and making people feel better all day long, right?
No, that's a good point. Definitely.
Awesome. And so now you said 9 years-ish in administration. What is that like?
It's different. I think you're working more with adults. I mean, I do miss being with the kids every day, and I see kids every day. And I mean, I spend most of my day, I guess, with kids, but a lot of the more difficult decisions and the management decisions have to do with working with adults, are what I found. And it's different. In other words, I'm sort of not in charge because I'm the vice principal, but I'm supervising, 300 to 400 to 500 kids as opposed to 20.
Yeah.
And the decisions I make have to be in the best interest sometimes of the school as opposed to the child. And I know that might sound odd to some people. I mean, I make decisions that I think are going to be good for kids, but I have to ultimately decide what's best for a classroom or for a school. And it changes your lens. It changes your lens a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something. You said I'm not necessarily in charge. I'm the vice principal, but no matter where you are in the hierarchy, you're never in charge. Just so we know that,
That's true.
whether you're the teacher, the vice principal, the superintendent, the school board, the state I mean, there's always somebody above you, and there's definitely a lot of little people below you helping drive where you go with life. So, how have you survived 8, 9, 10 years as a vice principal? I did it for 3 years, and they were
Mhm.
probably the hardest 3 years of my professional career. I can't imagine
Right.
9. How do you do it?
It's been tough. I'll be honest. I had probably 5 or 6 years ago. I had a breakdown. I had a mental breakdown where I lost it. I had intense anxiety. I woke up one morning. I was sweating. I couldn't get my brain to slow down. I couldn't settle down, and I was just overwhelmed by everything. And I'll be honest, I began taking medication for anxiety. I still take medication today. And that's something that, I mean, I share with staff members. I share with parents sometimes if it seems the right time. And I even share with students, that I take medicine to help me be a better me. And now that's not how I survived, but that helped me realize that I had to get some things under control. And it's easy to think that everything's important when you're even a teacher, not even a teacher, a teacher. When you're in education, sometimes it can be overwhelming because so much is thrown at you at once.
Right.
And I had to learn to really prioritize what's important.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get overwhelmed when you're dealing with, as a vice principal, I was dealing with discipline, 95% of my day. And that was tough. It just burnt me out. And it hurt me for a while. I lost 30 pounds. Like I said, it was a really tough time, but I got through it, and, much different today.
Can we talk about what might have led to that moment? And people that listen to this podcast, they've heard a little bit about my story and how I kind of got to that point a year ago where I finally just said, "Oh, I can't do this anymore," and
Right.
started getting some help through doctors and medication and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was living a long time behind this facade where I didn't want anybody in. I didn't want anybody to see what was really going on inside of me. And then you eventually get to this place where you're just ripped raw and you're completely exposed and you can no longer hide it. And there's nothing else you can do but reach out and get some help. You, how did that progression go for you? Can you even look back on it now and say, here's what led to to use your words, the breakdown?
I think there were things going on outside of school that were really stressful. There were things in school that were stressful. I remember it being testing season, and I remember having to organize 300 test booklets, having to barcode all these things. And I think when things outside of school and inside of school are both not at equilibrium, or both off, you're not at equilibrium, and it's just really, really difficult. And it's tough. It's almost a blur. It feels like I literally woke up one day and it was just crazy. I'm telling you, Dave, I woke up and I couldn't, I was freezing. I was shivering. I was shaking, but I had plenty of blankets. I mean, everything was fine, but I couldn't get my brain to slow down, to stop. And like I said, for a couple months, the smell of coffee was awful.
Mm.
And coffee's my favorite drink on the earth. And,
Right.
like I said, I lost 30 pounds. I had to get new clothes, and it was just, I don't know. I think it was the accumulation of the stress from dealing with discipline all day long. In other words, about 90% of my job was discipline, or some of it at that point, like I said, had to do with the testing time of the year. And I'm not an organized person. That's a weakness of mine. And doing that was very difficult. And then I had some things going on outside of school. And it all just came to a head. And, like you said, I wore a mask for a while. This was a time period when I was blogging a lot. And everything I blogged about were happy moments with my kids.
Yeah.
But in the inside, I was hurting at one point, and I wrote a piece. It's funny you mentioned the word mask. I wrote a piece called "The Mask We Wear,"
Mm-hmm.
and I talked about how I had been wearing a mask for so long. I didn't reach out to anybody except for my wife and maybe like one other friend, and that makes it so tough. And it's so hard to reach out because you think people are going to judge you and think that you're weak. And I know you talk about this a lot, but it's like,
Right.
the funny thing is, once you do, you gain so much strength. It's almost, it doesn't seem to make sense, but it's the truth. Once you reach out and you're vulnerable and you say, you know what, I messed up, or I mean, when you share your story about anxiety, I mean, there's so many people that can relate. We think we're alone, but we're not.
It's so true. It's and I hate to use this example, but I will. It's like coming out of the closet and saying, "This is the real me. This is who
Mhm.
I really am." And you're so afraid at that moment to get judged again. You know, you've had this facade for so long where you've kept yourself all zipped up and you presented what you wanted people to see, or you tried your best to hide the stuff you didn't want people to see. All along, they're seeing it, and now
Right.
you just feel completely exposed, completely vulnerable. And I'll speak for me, that adds like this whole extra layer of a spiral. So like for me, when I hit that rock bottom, I thought I was at the bottom, and then when I actually had to start talking about that situation, I spiraled again. It was like almost like a rebound spiral, because oh my gosh,
Right.
now people are going to think I'm flawed and I'm weak, and it's still a struggle I have. So like even just talking right now with you, there's this part in the back of my head that's wondering, okay, do people think I'm just making this up now? Or do they think this is a facade? Do they think this is fake? Or is this just hyperbole? I mean,
Right.
how do you find that balance between speaking truth, being authentic and being real, and yet still trying to, I'm sure you still have to fight the mask and the facade, that whole piece, right?
Definitely. No, I think it's, you've got to have a core group of people around you that are, good friends that you trust. And sometimes you have to make your circle smaller, which sounds crazy in this day in which we're really connected. But I think sometimes having a smaller circle in the beginning helps, because you can really, really be real. That's a great sentence. You
Right.
can be
No, it makes
real,
sense. Yeah.
in other words, with people. And sometimes I'm sure there are people that think, oh, there's no way. He's just pretending like he woke up. Like some mornings I'll wake up even now, and everything could be wonderful, and I'll wake up and I'll feel anxiety, and everything's wonderful. Nothing's wrong. My family's wonderful. My kids are great. My wife's great. My job is great. And for some reason, you feel a little bit just on edge, and I don't know why that is, but it's just, it's hard to describe unless you ever felt that way. And
So, but man, you're speaking it right now. Literally, before we went on air, I was having this conversation
yeah.
that just these last 3 or 4 days have been off for me, and I
Mhm.
can't find the trigger. I don't know what it is. I when I look around, everything is sunshine and rainbows, but it's inside. I had Quinn Rollins. I don't know if you know Quinn Rollins or not, but I had him on several months ago,
Play
and
like
he
a pirate. Yeah, I was watching some of that. Yeah.
absolutely,
Mhm.
and he made the statement that there are some people that say, I have those sad moments too. But okay, yeah, we've all been sad, but anxiety, depression, whatever it is it's different. But you've been able to manage this now. You say for 4 or 5 years. What is different now? Because you're still doing testing, you're still doing student discipline, I'm assuming, um,
Right.
and you're still in that arena doing these things that make it uncomfortable, that aren't necessarily in your wheelhouse. So what's different?
I guess, well, one thing, I'll be honest, I'm lucky I'm not doing testing anymore. But I
Okay.
don't think that's why it is. I think,
Man, if only we could have that trickle down to kids.
I'll tell you what, I know. I finally reached a point where I I didn't give a whatever about what if I mess up, I mess up.
Hmm.
And it takes a certain point where you're just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to make big mistakes. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to try to learn from them, and I'm going to move forward. And you stop worrying about them. It's really hard, and it sounds almost too easy, and it almost sounds cliche. But there comes a point where you're like, you know what? I'm flawed. I was I've heard about, I can't think of the name of this Japanese art where pottery cracks and they put it together with liquid gold. I can't think of the name of that, but it reminds me, I wish we could be that way in this sense. I wish I should have looked that up before I came on, but there's this pottery, I think it's Japanese or Chinese, but I think it's Japanese. And if a piece of pottery cracks, they literally piece it together with liquid gold. And it's so beautiful. And it made me think, you know what, if we were like that as people, if people could look at us and see, you know what, we all have our flaws, we all have our different cracks on the outside, I think we'd feel so much better. But we think that, everyone else has their stuff together, and nobody does. Nobody, from LeBron James to, who knows, Beyonce to whomever, the most, Tom Brady. actors, actresses, lawyers, Barack Obama, anybody. We think they have it together, and then all of a sudden you hear, you know what, they messed up, and they feel nervous too before they go on stage, or they wake up and they feel stressed, or whatever, and it makes you realize, you know what, I got to stop this. I got to stop beating myself up over this. I'm okay.
It's a great message. And I actually just looked it up. I'm going to totally butcher this, but kintsugi, is that what you were
That
trying
sounds
to?
right. Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
So those of you that are listening, just Google or speak to Alexa or Siri kintsugi, and you'll find out about the whole
Right.
gold repair of Japanese cracked art that I was just talking about.
Right.
I'm sure I completely butchered that pronunciation, but it is a perfect metaphor and analogy for the way that we need to do life better. But you're speaking to me, and I'm hearing this now also as a dad. And I'm getting some conviction of this, and probably also when I was an assistant principal or teacher or principal. And I would have kids that would just say, I'm sorry. And my response back to them would be, don't just say, I'm sorry, fix it, make it better. You can't just apologize for it and act like everything's okay.
Right.
So, I mean, can you just say, I'll use your words, my bad, and keep on moving? Or is there a way to say, no, I'm supposed to be striving for perfection. I'm always supposed to be trying to get better and better and better.
That's a good question. I think it depends. I mean, I think you basically, like we always tell kids, it's not what you say, it's what you do next. In other words, you have to show people that you really mean it. And I think, the biggest thing is just not beating yourself up over it. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned interviewing so many people on my bad when I had the podcast, actually stopped it last year, in other words, but I've recorded over 100 episodes. And what I found amazing is I would talk to some of the most brilliant educators around, and I thought there's no way they have these mistakes. They'd come on and they'd share insecurities and flaws that they have, and they're in amazing places. And I think sometimes it takes those moments like that to help us grow. And you don't feel like you're growing when you're in it. You feel like crap when you're in those moments. But later on down the road, you look back and you're like, okay, you know what, that helped me. And sometimes you're wrong, and you just have to apologize, and that person might not forgive you, but all you can really do is apologize and move forward and try to do better next time, and not beat yourself up. That's the hardest thing, is we've got to offer ourselves a little bit of grace, because you know as well as I do, we're harder on ourselves than we are on anybody else. We're no good for others if we're going to beat ourselves up.
The truth. I am my worst critic and my biggest enemy at the same time. And that's a dangerous combo. Oftentimes you want your worst, your biggest critic to be that person that loves you unconditionally and completely supports you. But when you feel like it's your enemy and that person's in your own head, man, it's vicious. How do you find grace yourself? How did you get to that place where you're like, man, I know that I'm strong, I'm good, I'm growing, or has that always been just inside of you and now you're just free to bring it out?
I think you have to take a step back and look at what really is. And I can give you an example. I wrote a piece probably, 4 or 5 years ago. And it talked about, I think it was called, I'm not as bad as I think I am, or something like that. And it was about being a parent. Because I used to think, I'm okay, but I'm like, my daughter would watch tons of TV. And my son would always be on his iPad playing. They're amazing kids. They're great. But I thought, what? She shouldn't be watching so much TV, and he shouldn't be watching so many of these videos or playing these games that involve a little bit of fighting or this and that. And then within a span of a week, my daughter came home, and I think she had gotten some award for like the Character Counts Award. And I heard a story about her. And then I heard a story about my son, how he was so kind to somebody in class. And I hear that often. I'm very lucky. But then I started thinking to myself, John, you got to ease up a little bit. You're a good dad. Just look at the evidence there. But sometimes, we want to make these stories up about ourselves that we're worse than we really are. And if we really look at the data, if you really look at what is, in other words, how my daughter is, how my son is, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the fact that you're sharing that wealth and that wisdom with the world, with so many people. And you do it in this way that it's so humble, filled with so much humility and grace. You don't you don't come across as a guy that says, here's all the answers, just follow my lead and everything's going to be great. But
Right.
how did you get to that place where you said, I want to share my voice. I want to share my words with a bigger audience than this close circle that you had?
My connected journey started with Todd Whitaker. Todd Whitaker, I saw him in, I think, 2013, 2014 at NAESP. And he said, you know what, if you're not on Twitter, you got to get on Twitter. And up until that point, I wasn't on anything. I mean, I thought, Twitter and Facebook were something. My wife was on it. I thought she follows movie stars. She still does all kinds of stuff like that. I thought, no way. But, I've said this a lot before, but I mean, if Todd Whitaker says something, then I do it. He's
True
pretty
story.
much, what he says is almost always right. And I got on and I became addicted and I started blogging. And then once I started blogging, I got the bug with that. I like telling stories. And then some of it is a little bit of a dopamine hit, to be honest with you. Some of it is a little ego thing where, you write a story or you share something and someone says, oh my gosh, that's really good. I like that. And you're kind of like, oh, that's pretty cool. But then there comes a point where you want to share that story, because then you realize not only are you sharing a story that someone likes, you're sharing a story that someone can connect with, and it helps them feel like they're not alone. That's what I try to do more than anything with my stories and a lot of podcasts, is just get people to realize, what, it's not just you. You're not the only one that woke up feeling like crap. You're not the only one who maybe got home and yelled at your own child, even though you were kind to the children at school. And I hate that. I've done that many times before, where I've gotten angry with my own kids and I've been calm with kids at school, which I should be. But what I need to be is calm with my kids at home too. And I've got to learn to sort of balance that energy and conserve some for when I get home.
True story. And our kids deal with that too. I mean, I've got 4 kids, and at school, they're all amazing. Sometimes at home, they drive me crazy, but I know it's because they've been keeping it all close to the vest. And we have to give ourselves that same grace and that same piece of understanding that kids are just little people. We're just big kids. I mean, we're the same. We go through the same issues and the same struggles, but we can also find the same successes. If we're willing to give kids grace, give ourselves some grace as well, but then continue to learn and grow from it. Grace is not the same thing as just acceptance. It's forgiveness and then moving forward. So
absolutely. And I think one thing to add, you talked about sharing. I've been very lucky in that the people that came on My Bad, that was the first podcast. I do Teacher's Aid now. But with My Bad, I was very lucky to have people trust me with their story. Yeah. And I think the key to that was being vulnerable first. In other words, I call it stepping first. You have to be vulnerable first for someone to be vulnerable with you. And I don't think we always realize that with students or with staff members as an administrator. I think we expect kids to share what's bothering them or what's inside them, and yet we haven't really shared what's inside our hearts, what's bothering us. And to a degree and to what's acceptable, I think we have to be able to open up to our staff and to our students. I mean, I've done that with students. I've done that with staff, where I've sat down with them one-on-one and said, look, I had a breakdown. I take medication for this. And I know several times where it's helped staff members feel a little bit better and realize, you know what, I mean, they didn't say it, but you could tell they were thankful that I was sharing that with them and that they realized they weren't alone.
Does that make you a stronger person, or do people look at you as though you're weaker when you admit that stuff?
Ironically, I don't know if that's the right word. I think it's stronger. And that's the craziest thing, because I think we always think if we share our weaknesses, we're going to appear weaker.
Yeah.
But every time I end up gaining strength from it, because what happens is so many people can relate, and then you're connected to more people, and then you're connected to more people. And then they're like, you know what? Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for saying that. Or thank you for allowing me to share my story. When people came on My Bad, a lot of folks came on and they said it was very cathartic. Yeah. But, it doesn't seem to make sense that if you share something that you mess up in, or share a mistake, or share a time where you lost your temper, that people would look at you in a greater light. But they do. I mean, so many people listen to the episodes or might read a piece that involves a mistake, and they think, wow, that's pretty cool. We're all connected. We're so similar. That's right. The big thing. We're so similar.
And the deal is relationships are based off of relatability. And if we if we try to put forth this front that we're on a pedestal and we're perfect, then everybody else out there that realizes that they're not perfect will not feel like they can relate to us. It's
Right.
when we expose ourselves and say, no, man, I'm just like you. I have the same battles, the same struggles, the same fears. That's when real relationships can happen. And it's not in a method to try to manipulate. It's not to try to get inside of somebody's head, but it's to be authentic, and it's to form trust. And somebody that's a leader, you know that trust is the foundation of all growth. If there's no trust, there's no growth, because you can't have the real conversations that are necessary. So I commend you for recognizing all of that, that you've got to put that out there and say, no, this is really me, good, bad, ugly, whatever. This is me. Now let's grow together. That's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I call it stepping first. I mean, I think we have to step first, whether we're an administrator, a teacher, a parent, whatever. And I didn't know this. I learned a couple years ago. I read a book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle.
Okay.
Amazing book, brilliant book. And in that, I forget the researcher the person who did this research, but they found out that you have to actually, vulnerability comes before trust. And up until reading that a couple years ago, I thought that trust came before vulnerability. But they did all these studies, and they found that once you feel comfortable being vulnerable with someone, then comes the trust.
Wow.
And I think a lot of times we have that backwards. And I'll be honest, I had that backwards. I didn't know it was that way. But once you're vulnerable, once you're able to goof off, be silly, sing out loud, dance, do whatever, then all of a sudden that leads to a trust. Someone, okay, this is a person I can trust. This is someone who's willing to show a goofy side, a silly side, a tearful side. Well, then that's someone who I can trust when the times get tough.
That's good. That's powerful. That's a lot of wisdom right there. As a guy that's a vice principal who spends so much of his day doing discipline and doing a lot of the tasks that a lot of people just don't want to do. I find it interesting that when I said, tell your story, this is kind of where we landed. Mm-hmm. This is the story. This is where you spend your time during the day, at night. This is what you think about, what you fixate on, is the idea of trust and vulnerability and relationships and relatability. We talked about the fact that you had multiple podcasts, you write blogs. Is this the voice that comes out all the time? Is this the message?
I think vulnerability is a big thing for me. I think that's the big message. I think that, along with what Mandy and I talk about on Teachers Aid, I think one of my biggest passions right now is helping teachers, because I see so many teachers leaving their profession. I see so many teachers hurting and in pain because teaching, it's gotten a lot harder.
Right.
I mean, I taught, I guess it's been 14 years since I taught, and it's been 23 or 4 since I started. And it's so difficult. And it pains me to see so many teachers just struggling. And I know, because I mean, I've been there with them, especially when I was an administrator. I had it a lot easier when I was teaching, no doubt. I mean, it's just getting tougher. And so that's where my passion is finding ways to help teachers feel better about themselves. If I can help a teacher feel better, give them a tactic, a strategy, a way to help them make it through the day or the week, or, just feel better about themselves, then I feel like it's been successful.
And I'll say you are making that difference. Whether people just follow you on Twitter, or they read your blog posts, or they listen to Teachers Aid, or whatever the case may be, or they read my bad, whatever the case may be, you're making that difference. You're connecting with people across the country who are listening to your words and saying, man, he made it. I can do this. One more day, give myself some, yep, today was horrible, but that's on me. Tomorrow's gonna be better. And they just keep going. And then eventually it turns into 22, 23, 24 years. And you look back and you've had pretty spectacular career. So I appreciate you bringing your voice out there and sharing your journey and your successes and your struggles. It's powerful, and it does make a difference.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That means a lot. I mean, it's funny. I'll read a piece, and I'm not going to lie. I do look and see sometimes how many people read it. Yeah. I know I'm not supposed to, but I do. But then I'll get that comment of somebody who said, it really touched them, or it really helped them, or they connected. And that right there means more than, whatever, 100 or 200 or 1,000 views. I mean, it's funny because we look for if I'm being honest, we all have that. We look for the views. We want people to listen to us and hear what we're saying. But then you make that one connection with that one person who really bonded with what you said, and it makes all the difference in the world. You don't care if anybody else reads it that
That's
ever.
it. It's about the quality of the connection, not the quantity of connections. And
Exactly. But
sometimes you spread yourself so thin, you're so worried about getting eyes on it, you lose sight of getting the right eyes on it at the right time for the right person.
exactly.
And I appreciate that still is still your focus, even though your platform has grown. You still focus on the individual person, and that's something that I find remarkable about you and what you do. Is it truly does feel like a one-on-one connection each and every time. So whatever that magical touch is that you've got, man, don't change it. Don't make it like about the mass market. It works. So keep going.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I mean, you covered a lot here. There's a lot that people are gonna learn from this and hopefully grow from this. Do you have that one nugget? I typically call it that mic drop moment, but do you have that one nugget that you want to leave people with, so that maybe when they park their car or when they're laying down at bed tonight, whatever the case is, that's gonna be the thing that resonates, and they're gonna remember, oh man, Jon Harper said blah, and it'll make an impact?
I think there's so many in education. We have all those moments, but I had one recently where I went to it was a men's dinner it was just men and fellowship. It wasn't business. It wasn't anything. It was just men's. And I happened to have there were two guys there that I happened to teach in elementary school. And I used to run a young gentleman's club in which I had fifth graders. And what was so cool was that this one guy, I took a picture with him, shook their hand, gave him a hug. It was so great to see him. I almost teared up when I saw him there. And later that day, a friend of mine said, "You got to see this." One of the guys posted, "You know what? Mr. Harper was great. He taught me. I mean, I don't mean it was great. In other words, what I had impacted him, and I really didn't know I had impacted him." And I think the thing that I want teachers to hear, and this is hard, is that we're in the long game, and yet we live day to day. In other words, you're going to teach a kid, and you might not always know the impact you make, but 5 to 10 years down the road, the kid's going to come back and say, "You know what? I'm glad you busted my tail that day. I'm glad you were hard on me. I'm glad you made me say, 'Yes, sir.' I'm glad you didn't let me turn that paper in because it wasn't my best." And it's hard because in the moment, we live day to day. It's natural. We live in the moment. We're supposed to live in the moment. But got to remember that we're planting seeds. And, we're not going to see the growth for a while sometimes. And that's very difficult. But in the long run, a couple years later, you're going to have, that sounds corny, a harvest. You're going to have a wonderful harvest where you're going to go to Walmart, you're going to go to wherever, and you're going to see people, and you're going to realize, you know what, damn it, I did something. And it feels good.
That's so good. I relate it to the fact that we are educational missionaries. I mean, you can stand on the street corners and scream hellfire and brimstone, but see what kind of difference that makes. Or you can plant those seeds and just know that
Right.
little by little it's going to grow and sprout, and lives are going to change. And I'm reminded of the idea that as educators, as parents, our job is not to create perfect kids. Our job is to create successful, future, independent adults. And to get there, it's impossible to have perfection because they have to experience the mess. They've got to learn how to overcome and fight through. Otherwise, they're going to be a mess later on. So embrace it while you can.
No,
So
that's a great point. Yeah, we can't hold their hands. No.
that's good. Well, man, you are truly killing this thing called life. You're killing education, and so many different levels. You're just an outstanding, awesome guy. Can you just tell people how they can connect with you so they can continue on this journey and learn more about you and what you're up to?
Sure. The best way to connect with me would be on my website at johnharper.blog. And John is spelled Jon, but just johnharper.blog. I have everything there about my podcast, blogs, speaking, and my one book.
There you go. That's awesome. And it's all linked in the show notes here, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on the podcast, you'll be able to see it all there. So you can always click on that and get directly to it. So you can track Jon on his journey as he continues to kill life and continues to inspire us. Thanks, John. I appreciate you so much, man. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to do this with us.
I appreciate it, Dave. You made me feel very comfortable, and I felt like we're just sitting at a coffee shop talking, so that's great. Thank you.